Hi, I'm Shannon from houseimprovements.com, and I'm back here with another video in our cabinet series. I'm going to show you here how to hinge the doors for these upper cabinets and also how to install them on the cabinet and put the handle on. So we're going to start out with, we've got some maple shaker style doors here. So we've got the solid maple frame around the outside and a quarter panel plywood insert. So that's the style of door we have. They're already drilled on the back for the European type hinges, like that. I bring my doors in finished and drilled, so just speeds up the process. You can buy a drill bit to drill these holes, which I have set up in the drill press there because I had to adjust the depth on a couple. But you can buy a Forstner bit to drill these holes if you want, and they're a special size, which I believe is 35 mils. But anyways, I bring mine in basically ready to hinge. So the type of hinge I'm using today is it's got a soft closing mechanism built right into it. These are getting quite popular, but most of these hinges are all the same other than a few little features like that. So to start with, I just want to mount these into the door. So they drop into the cup hole. I want to line it up so the hinge is straight with this edge of the door. And I mean, you could measure it. I'm just kind of eyeballing it up there. I'm going to hold it down. I'm just going to pre-drill the two screw holes. You can see I have my drill bit set at a depth so that it isn't going to come through the front of the door, because I'm just using it as a pre-drilling hole. Center it up, stick it in there, and plunge that down. I'll just do the other one while I'm doing it. Like so. And these particular hinges, I'm using a number 6 flathead 5/8 long screw to attach them. Your hardware could be slightly different, so just use whatever you need to go along with the hardware you have. We're dealing with frameless cabinets, so there's no face frame on the front. It's just an open box. Okay, so that's that part of the hinge. Now the other piece that's part of the hinge is this plate that actually mounts in the cabinet, and the hinge clips onto it. So I'm going to just clip this on here first. I do this a little different than some people might. I've got a little jig that I use that I've bought that is spaced out. The holes, there's quite a few different holes in here, but the main two I use are right here, and they're spaced out the right distance to pre-drill, or at least mark those spots of this plate. So determine from your hinges, come back down here. Determine from the bottom of your door, up from the door to the center of that cup hole, to determine the placement of this plate here. Okay, so depending on how your door is actually drilled, will give you a measurement you need to come up the cabinet. So in my case, it's, I forget exactly what it is, but I deduct the thickness of the bottom here because my doors are going to be flush to this line right above my finger. So anyways, my measurement's 71 millimeters to the center of this template. So I'm just, I put a measured mark there. I just get a straight line. Now in my case, I slide my jig up to the center line here, and then I just mark my screw points. And like I said, this is going to really vary depending on what type of hinges you're using. So now what I do, I've got that bottom one marked. I'm going to mount my plate to the cabinet, the bottom plate. These particular ones, they all have a certain direction they have to go in. So depending on your plate, put it in the right direction. You can usually tell that by clipping it into a hinge, and that'll give you the idea which way it's got to go. They'll only fit in one way. So now I'm just going to mark or just mount this one in the cabinet to the holes or to the marks I've already predetermined to set my height and my distance in from the front edge. Okay, so I've got that one in there. Now what I need at the top, I'm not going to mount that to the cabinet ahead of time, the top plate, but what I do need is just a center line of where the screws are going to be. So I just take my jig and give myself a center line so I know where I'm going to be, and I'll show you why here in just a second. Hopefully I'm not going to be in the way of the camera too much. Get a couple screws out here. Okay, so I've got my door, I've got my hinges mounted to it, and I've got my, actually I've got this in the wrong spot. I want to put my plate on the top hinge. This is the way the door is going to be when it's open. So now I can come over here, and at the bottom hinge, can you see this? I clip my hinge on, like so, because that's already measured, I know my height there. And now I can move the door slightly in and out until the center of the holes in this plate line up with that pencil line I put there. And once it does, I can put my screw in. You can measure this all out and mount both plates, but it seems like more times than not, you get them all on there and one of the two of them is not 100% in the right spot. This way, I mark my bottom ones. I determine that height right off the start. This one automatically, when it's clipped to the door, goes to where it's got to be. Okay, so I just snug that up. So now my door is on there, right? So I've got my other door prepped up. I'm just going to clip it into place. These particular style hinges I have clip on and off the plate really easily by this little release mechanism back here. So now that I already had these plates mounted on this side, so I just clip the door on so they're both hanging on here. Now what I need to do at this point is close the doors so that I can do some adjusting. These hinges all are adjustable. Now like I said, these are a slow close hinge, so I'm just assisting them in closing a little quicker. Now basically what I want to look at when I first close it is I want to look at this gap that's between the doors. Right now I've probably got 1/4 of an inch in there, and that's way more than you need. I usually like to have 1/8 of an inch or less between there. So I know right off the start I'm going to have to squeeze both doors together a little bit. Okay, so that's not a problem. I'll show you how to do all that. The other thing I'm looking at while they're closed is the alignment of how they actually are sitting in the cabinet. You know, is the door leaning one way or the other? And that's also adjustable. I'm also looking at how the two doors line up from each other. If I put this as some contrast behind there, you can probably see a little bit better. This door is probably close to 1/8 inch lower right now than that door. So all these things are adjustable by using the mechanisms on the hinges. So like I said, once you first get them on there, just have a look at the overall fit and determine which types of adjustments you need to make. So the first thing I usually do is get the doors sitting true so they aren't cockeyed one way or the other. This one here is actually pretty good right now. This other one needs to just go back at the top a little bit. So if you look at the hinges, there's 2 screws here. In fact, you might be able to see better if I'm just hanging on to it. So this is the piece that's inside the cabinet. So this screw right here will actually move the doors side to side this way. This hinge here, or this screw here, the back one on the hinge, will actually move the doors in and out. Okay, so with those right there, you can do quite a few adjustments on their own. The other thing that adjusts on these plates anyways. So this is the plate that's inside the cabinet. When I loosen this screw, if I can get a hold of it here, that plate actually slides up and down. So I've got some up and down movement as well on those plates. So you've got a fair bit of adjustment just in the hinges alone, and usually if you've got them all installed consistently and the doors drilled consistently, you'll have enough movement in just those items to adjust the doors the way you need them. So I'm going to turn this screw here to just lean the back edge of the door back a little bit. And it usually doesn't take much adjustment to make a pretty good movement. Okay, so I've got the doors sitting pretty good as far as this way, right? I've got them pretty true. I'm still not level on the bottom here, and I can see that this door, the whole door, needs to come down just a little bit. So that's where adjusting the plate, the sliding mechanism on the plate, comes into play. So I loosen those screws off, and I can drop that door down. I'll just snug it up and check it. See if we're getting closer. So we're pretty close there. I could probably come down just a little bit more. Now if I can't quite get low enough with this one, I can always loosen that door and raise it up just a hair. Usually between the two, you can get everything pretty darn close. And the more doors you have all in a row, like in a big bank of cabinets like over on this wall, well, even that isn't a good example, but if you had a bank of cabinets where you had 4 or 5 doors all in a row here, this is pretty critical to get a nice even line all the way across there with all your doors, and that's where this comes into play, is adjusting using the hinges. So I'm really close there. So I think we're going to stop with the up and down movement on the doors for right now. Now I'm going to concentrate on closing this gap up. So that's the front screw on the hinge. I'm just going to give this a little bit of adjustment. So as I do that, that door is moving over. I'm looking at my space over here. I'll want to look at this space here as I move this door. And it's just a matter of just playing back and forth a little bit until you're happy with all your reveals, that everything is looking pretty straight. I'm just going to come a little bit more with this door. So now I'm down to the space that I'm pretty happy with there, and it's nice and even. One thing I do have, whoops, lose my balance. When I push on the corners of the doors, those 3 are all nice. There's no movement there, but when I push here, there's some movement there. So that's telling me that the door needs to be adjusted in and out a little bit this way, and that's that back screw. So I'm just going to look down the space that was left there. I still need a little bit more. Okay, and I've got it adjusted all the way in at the top. So if I move the bottom out just a hair, that actually helps my top. There we go. So we're good there. We'll just close it up again. Just look that things look nice and flat. The doors are nice and flat this way. I've still got a little bit of a difference between the height of this door and that one. And I've got this one adjusted all the way down, so I'm going to have to lift this one up. So again, that's just by using these hinge plates. So I loosened off these couple screws. Just lift that door ever so slightly. And it should be pretty good. So it takes a little bit of fiddling around. The more of them you do, the better you'll get at it. I'm still a little bit low there. When you're all done, just on the ones that slide like that, you just need to make sure they're tight when you're done. There, I'm happy with that. Our spaces look good. They look nice and equal all the way around, so I'm happy with that. So we've got the door operating properly. Like I said, these hinges have a damper built right into them, so they'll slowly close without slamming, and which is kind of a nice feature. Now the other thing to do is we want to drill these doors to put the knobs on. In this case, we're just using single knobs. You might be using a pull that has 2 holes drilled, but just a matter of measuring it out and mounting on there. Now I like to put just a little piece of painter's tape on there so I'm not scratching the door when I'm making my measurements. Where you put this knob is really more of a preference thing. Some people, like my camera guy, like the knob center more down here, centered in this height. What I like is centered in the width of the rail here, and I'm usually just in line with this here, or just slightly under in this case. Basically what I've got here is I'm 2 inches up from the bottom of the door, and I'm 1.1/8 in from the edge, and that's the center of my hole. If you're doing a lot of these, I don't so much for the single knobs, I mark them each one out, but if you're doing a lot of them, you can make up a little jig just out of a piece of plywood with a hole in it or whatever that fits on the corner of the door, and you get that same mark all the time. That's especially helpful when you're doing a pull handle where you've got to drill 2 holes that are, you know, a specific amount of distance apart. It's just more accurate and a little bit quicker when you've got a number to drill. As far as drilling the hole for the knob, most of them, if you drill the hole at 11/64, is just a nice size hole for the screw that comes with the knob. But again, just double check with the hardware you're using to be sure you are using the right size. So what I'm going to do, I've got the luxury of having this pointed tapered drill bit. So I usually pre-drill my hole first. It's slightly smaller than the finished size. Use a block of wood on the back side so that when the bit comes through here, it doesn't leave a big splintery mess. If you have a piece of wood there, you hold it in place. Try not to drill through your finger. So I drill a pilot hole first with this slightly smaller bit. Okay, so I've got that one. Now I'm going to my 11/64. I can pull the tape off if I want. I'm still using my backer piece. Holding it there, keeping my fingers out of the way so I don't drill through them. And just let the drill bit do the cutting. You shouldn't have to force it through there. If you're forcing it, then it's probably too dull. Get another one. Just let it do the cutting and you have less chip out and damage. So once you've got your hole drilled, most knobs I've ever seen, they come with at least one length of screw, like one type of screw, and the knob obviously. Screw goes through the back. Start the knob on there until it's just snug. I guess I've got my screwdriver in my back pocket, and just tighten it up. Not too difficult about that. I've seen some knobs, sometimes especially these single ones, they tend to come loose over time. I don't have it with me here now, but what I have done in the past is actually put a little drop of Loctite on the threads of the screw once I pushed it through the door, and then put the knob on. Don't use the, now I'm trying to think, I think it's the red Loctite is the one that's harder to get off. But there's a blue, I think blue is the other color. It at least can be removed if you need it to be, but yet it kind of glues the threads together. So I think that's the coloring, but you can read right on the package. So anyways, a little drop of thread lock on there really helps keep these knobs tight all the time. They just work their way loose from grabbing them and using the door. So, okay, so that's our upper cabinet. We've got the doors on, we've got the hinges all on, we've got everything adjusted, and we've got the knobs in. Now what I'd like to show you is something similar but on the base cabinets. I've already hung the door because it's really just the same idea as this. You know, use your measurements you've got as far as your hinge holing. But I'm going to show you how I put the drawer front on. Okay, so I'm back and I just want to show you how to prep and install this drawer front onto this drawer area. The fronts I'm using are solid maple. So you might have drawer fronts that are the same style as the doors, like a quarter panel style where it's got the rails around the outside. So you'll need to just adjust the this process a little bit for those. But basically what I do, I take a couple, I get my door on below to start with. So I've got my door here on. It's all leveled and adjusted the way I want it. I take a couple of spacers and I lay it on top of the door. I figure out what I need for space so that when my drawer front's on, it's level with the top of the doors beside it. Okay, so I've got that. I take and measure, I figure out a position on the front of the drawer box where I can drill a hole so that I can put screws through this hole into the back side of the drawer front. So there's a couple things to consider here. One is if you're using a drawer front that's got the same frame like this and quarter panel drawer, obviously you can't put screws out in this area. They have to get into this solid piece on the edge. So your holes are going to need to be quite a bit closer over to the edges. Okay, so think about that for one. Also think about what type of handle you're putting on so that these holes don't interfere with wherever your handle is going to be. In our case, we're just having one pull on this size of drawer right in the middle, so these ones don't interfere. I've got my holes moved in a little bit further because the fact we have a solid piece of wood, I can pretty much put a screw anywhere in it. So determine those spots and mark it out and drill about a 3/16 hole at those two positions. Okay. Now what I want to do is take my drawer front. I like to go right to the area I'm working, lay the drawer front in a corresponding way to where it's going to go on so that I don't get myself mixed up. So in my case, this drawer front I went on like this. So I just simply took it and laid it completely in the same direction. So I know this is the bottom, this is left and right. I can't get mixed up on marking this out. I put a small piece of tape in the general area that's going to correspond to where these holes are because I want to transfer this position of those holes onto the back of the drawer front. So with my spacer in place, I was able to measure up, get a height to the holes, and I was able to measure from the edge of the door over to the centers of the holes and get all those measurements figured out. Again, yours are going to be whatever you determine to use. I marked that out then on the drawer, measured it all out on the back of the drawer front, marked it on the tape, and then I just did a real small, I don't even know what size hole that is, just a real small pilot hole in the back of the wood so that I have a point to start at. So I drilled that already on there, marked it out and drilled it. I can take these tapes off, right off the drawer. I can move my little spacer. And I'm just going to bring the drawer out to a position where I can work for a second. So next, I determined length of screw. This is a number 8 flathead screw that isn't too long that when I put it through the front of the drawer and into the drawer front, it won't protrude through the finished face. So in this case, because of the material we're using, I'm using an 1¼ inch screw. And it gives me a little bit of room to play with so it doesn't come through the finished drawer. So I stick that screw through so the points are coming out through the front of the melamine there. And the reason for that is now I can take my drawer front, line up the point of the screw and drop it into those little pre-drilled holes that we had and get myself basically in the right area for where I need to be. So I just start by doing one at a time. I'm just going to line it up there, get it kind of started, and I just thread the screw in a little bit until I get the other one lined up and started. So I just move that around till I get it into the little hole that I pre-drilled. Again, just get it kind of started. So now I've got the front basically on there, and I just need to tighten those 2 screws up. I just want to go to a little smaller drill. Won't make so much noise. So I can tighten these screws up then. Just get them snug for now. Make sure that it pulled the drawer, the top front of the drawer and the drawer front together tightly so there's no space. Oh, did I take those out? Yeah, I guess I already took those spacers out. I can let the drawer close. Now I can come down here and do a little bit of fine tuning if I need to. What I want to look at is the space I've got between the top of the door and the bottom of the drawer front. I want to make sure that it looks equal, and I'm happy with the space that's there. I want to look that the edge of my door and drawer line up on both sides, and these are really good right there. And I want to look that the top of the drawer here lines up with the top of the doors or drawers or whatever are beside it. And we're pretty darn good there too. We're maybe not even a 16th there. I'm not even going to worry about that. It looks good. We got a nice equal space in here. Okay, well, we kind of lucked out there. Usually what happens is you may have to back those screws off and just slightly tweak this drawer front around a little bit. Depending on the hardware you're using, you might also have some adjustment in the hardware, the drawer hardware itself, as far as moving the drawer up and down, side to side. With the type of hardware we have here, I do have that luxury, but in this case, we really aren't going to need it. So just, like I said, stand back, make sure that your drawer front is aligned properly with everything else around it. When you're happy with that being that way, then I just take a screwdriver and just snug those screws up a little tighter, just to be sure that they're going to be good, like that. So we've got that in place. Now the next thing I'm going to do is measure and drill my hole in here for the pull. So just like the door that we showed you just before this, I'm just using a single knob. On this width of drawer, my personal preference is just one knob if you're using knobs. As soon as you get, about to about 24 inches or bigger, then I'd consider going to 2 knobs. You start getting a real wide drawer like that and you've got a single knob on it. Sometimes, depending on the hardware you're using, it doesn't open and close as easily, pulling just from the middle. You may need 2 knobs on it to get a little different feel. I've kind of got that. If you look over here, you can see what I mean on these wider. These drawers are about 32 inches. So I've got a knob at each side. Just makes it easier to operate. And I think it looks better too than a big drawer with one single knob in it. But then back to here, this one's 15, 16 inches. To me, one knob still makes sense on this. Okay, so but that, again, that's a personal preference, whatever you want. So much like we did on the door up above there, I'm just going to use a piece of tape, put it approximately in the position that I know I'm going to have that pull. So in this case, I know I'm putting one right in the center, so I measure my total width and split that in half. It's about there, and if you want to just double check, you just measure from the other end, you know that you're going to be all right. My drawer fronts are 6 inches high, so I'll just measure 3 inches down. So there's the center point for my hole. Again, I like to use this point a bit just as the first initial pass, just because it's got a nice point on it. I can get it right on that point. If you have drill bits with a brad point, would kind of do the same thing for you. So just hold the drill nice and straight, so you aren't going on any crazy angle. Drill right through. Now we've got the melamine inside. We still want to put something on the back side, on the inside, just so that when we drill, the drill bit comes out, it doesn't chip as bad. Okay, so we got that one. I'm just going to finish it off with a little bit bigger bit. Okay, so I've got the 11/64 or whatever bit works best for the size of screw you're using. Use my backing, my block piece on the back side again. Okay, so we got that. Just going to pull that tape off, get rid of any little slivers that are there. These particular pulls came with 2 lengths of screws with them, and luckily enough, one length works on the where you just have the thickness of the door, and one works for this thickness I have with the drawer fronts and everything. So there are other screws out there that come longer, and they have spots where you can cut them off with a side cutter to get the length you want, or you can just buy a specific length screw if the ones that come with the knob don't work. Okay, the reason I do the knob last is then that way I've got my drawer fastened on there in position. The knob's just another little bit of alignment tool to keep it where it needs to be. Okay, so not much to that. The other thing, and I forgot to show on the doors up there, even though these are soft close drawers and doors, I still like to use a little rubber cushion, rubber bumper. And I just stick it on the drawers. I stick it onto the drawer about in the center of the height where it will contact back onto the frame, so that it just goes back nice, and it just takes any little bit of contact and cushions it down. For the doors, I'll just go back up here because I didn't do it before. I actually stick it on the frame of the cabinet. One at the top, one at the bottom. And do it for each door. It just keeps them operating nice and quiet and smooth. Okay, so as you can see, if you've been watching kind of the series we've done with this set of cabinets, I'm getting close to the end here as far as getting all the various bits and pieces put together. I've got a few more handles here to put on, a couple doors up there. We've got one door that was damaged over there that I've got to put on, but we're getting close to the end of this. One of the next steps, once I actually had all the crown mold on and everything, I basically go through each cabinet, wipe it down, clean it out for pencil marks, touch up any chips, anything like that. Put on screw caps to cover any exposed screw heads, and basically get the shelves put in there, and then they're pretty much done. The next step after that would be the countertops, and we're just waiting for those to arrive. So when we have them, you'll see a video on that as well. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions at all, you can go to our website and go to the forum there, post your question up or make a comment there. On the video here itself, you can click the thumbs up sign if you like what you've seen. That'd be appreciated. And you can subscribe also to our YouTube channel. So thanks for watching, and we'll hopefully see you back here.